Hey, Blip here. Thanks for joining me today. I wanted to share with you some really cool software and some scripting that's just awesome for getting yourself up and running with Arch Linux. So Arch Linux has been around for decades, and it is a very robust Linux distribution that I think a lot of folks are just paranoid about jumping into. Either it's because maybe they don't have a very strong foundation in Linux, or they do have a foundation and they're just leery of how Arch Linux it runs the gamut, right? Where it's maybe it's too on the bleeding edge. Maybe they don't like the step by step to get up and running. Arch Linux has come a long way over the years in terms of developing native tooling to help you. And in addition, there's some other tooling that's been out there for a long time by my buddy Rich, who has developed a program called RichARCH. And essentially, it is, in my opinion, the path of least resistance to getting up and running with Arch Linux. It is a concierge of getting up and running with Arch Linux. It's there to serve you, to streamline it. It knows how to bring in and work within the Arch Linux ISO. You start there in the native ISO. You start in that installation environment and you run RichARCH, and it takes care of the rest. It walks you through all the steps. You don't have to guess. It will let you dive into the nitty-gritty where you want to. It will help hold your hand with the installation. I highly recommend it so much that I went ahead and joined Rich with his open source initiatives here and helping the team with testing a couple different desktop environments and some other things. And I'm just very proud to say that and honored to be a part of the team at RichARCH, and I wanted to share it with you. I wanted to be another voice for Arch Linux. I was always the traditionalist when it came to Linux distributions. I tend to sway more towards Ubuntu, Pop! OS, etc. And I think over the years, as I got more and more involved with some software development of my own and getting immersed in things like the Steam Deck, it just brought to light and brought more prominence to not only KDE Plasma, but Arch Linux itself, and being a voice for Arch Linux that I think has been great for the community. So I'm going to show you RichARCH today. I'm going to do a couple videos on this actually, and this first one is going to be about how to get up and running, either because you just want to test it out or because you want to plan for your own server farm, etc. I'm going to today show you how to get up and running with RichARCH and Arch Linux inside of VMware Workstation Pro. Now, VMware Workstation Pro, a lot of people don't know this either, is free. It used to cost me in the neighborhood of $120 to $200, depending on the year in the past, when it was fully owned by VMware. Broadcom since bought out that software line and they made it free. You do have to jump through some hoops on the Broadcom site, but once you do that, you get full access to a pro license for personal usage that you can use at your own discrepancy. And it's awesome. Awesome. I highly recommend it as an alternative to some of the other hypervisors out there. Today, I'm going to be doing this on Windows. I'll do another one in Linux with the Pro software that I use for Linux. The name's left my mind, but we'll do a demo on that as well. So today we're going to do RichARCH, sort of tweaking Arch Linux for you and getting it onboarded for you inside of VMware Workstation Pro. Okay, so the first thing you got to do, obviously, is go to the Arch Linux site. That'll bring you to archlinux.org, and you'll want to download the ISO there. And there's links here. They've got different ways to get at the ISO. I recommend the magnet torrent link if you are comfortable and familiar with downloading via torrent. Don't be paranoid about that. There is a legitimacy to torrenting and using torrents for speed of downloading software like ISOs. And it's a very feasible way to get at ISOs faster for distributions, and I do recommend it. So you can go that way. You can go download from one of the existing mirrors that they link down below, and they have all kinds of mirrors for different countries. So just go to your country and click on the link, and there'll be mirrors, multiple mirrors potentially offered for you. There's also some worldwide mirrors down here as well. So I've already got the ISO downloaded, so I'm going to jump right into the process, and we're going to get started in VMware. So in Workstation Pro 25H2, the latest update, I'm running this inside of Windows 11. Here we go. We're going to create a virtual machine. I'm just going to do the typical, not get overly fancy with this, and I'm going to go choose the ISO that I downloaded earlier today. And this is the latest ISO. So Arch Linux releases a new ISO, generally speaking, on the 1st of every month. And RichARCH also keeps pace with that. I help Rich and the RichARCH folks test various desktop environments after Arch Linux does their release. And so you don't have to worry about RichARCH scripting lagging behind whatever the ISO and native install process is doing. You don't have to worry about that. So I'm going to select that ISO. And then I'm going to tell VMware, yes, I'm doing a Linux 64-bit operating system. I think they actually, do they actually reference Arch Linux in here? Let's see if they do. I think they do. No, they do not. So what you can do is just do the other Linux 6X kernel 64-bit and just leave it there and press on. And then I'm going to give my machine a name. I'm actually going to call this RichARCH. And I'm going to tell it where I want my VMs, and that's fine. I have a folder set up already for my VMs. You may want to go ahead prior to doing this, decide, where you want your VMs to be housed. Hopefully you got a large external drive or internal drive where you can bake away some space for your VMs. Mine happens to be just another drive, internal drive, where I have a separate partition set aside for this. So I'm going to do that there. And then I'm going to declare my disk size. I like to, just generally speaking, I like to do 60 gig. That's a good starting place. The nice thing about being a VM, you can always, expand it later if you have to. VMware also gives you the choice to split up your hard disk into multiple files. There's some advantages and disadvantages to doing that. I like to keep it simple, and I like to do single VMDK files for my VMs. The 60 gig also gives you a sufficient amount of starting space, especially if you're doing some fancier desktop environments that may require a lot more in your root partition for the OS. And so I highly recommend you start with 60, and that gives you a little bit of flexibility getting started with different, should you choose to flip between different desktop environments. Do that, and then I'm going to change my memory setting. Did I miss that? Okay. I'm going to customize here. And memory. I have a lot of memory on this particular workstation, so I'm going to go ahead and give it 8 just because I have room to grow there. I have 64 on my host system, so, and this was long before the crazy RAM prices we have today. So it really sucks today from a RAM pricing standpoint. But so whatever you can do, give it to the OS, and I'll let you work that out. But I'm going to do 8. And then I'm going to close that out for hardware. Make sure that, and it generally does in the simple setup, that you do set aside a CD-ROM drive, because that's where we're going to mount the ISO to boot from. And you can see it's already carried that over from my selection earlier. Network adapter, best course of action is to start with NAT. If you end up having a lot of issues with DNS resolution and getting things to download, try flipping over to Bridge, but start out with NAT on your networking. It's the best way, in my opinion, to get started with VMs from a networking standpoint. Gives you a little more flexibility. It also segregates your VMs behind their own little mini subnet, and then they can NAT out or translate over to your host system's networking. So we're going to do that. I'm going to stop there in terms of hardware config. That looks good to me for getting started, and I'm going to hit finish. So we've declared our base VM, given it a couple, it defaults to a couple cores, which is fine for Linux, getting started, doing simple things. If you're going to be doing a lot of either like development work or maybe some work with AI or some other things, well, AI, you're probably going to want native hardware, right? But you may need to tweak the cores here based on your system and expected load type. So that's saved across. I'm going to get this started. And what this is going to do is this is going to fire up Arch Linux vanilla. But what it does is it brings you into their installation environment medium. So you'll see what I mean here in a minute. So a lot of distros will give you like a live disk, right? And you can boot in, you get a desktop, and you can install from there. Arch Linux doesn't do that. They give you a minimal shell, and then they expect you to kind of take it from there. And that's where a lot of people, I think, get either scared or reluctant, or they just don't want to mess with it. So today I'm going to show you a great way to move forward, and that's with RichARCH. RichARCH also is fantastic if you are planning to spin up like a test farm or even a production farm of servers. It gives you a quick way to spin up and build Arch Linux-based systems because of all of the scripting that Rich has done on top for you. There are some Kickstart files that you can establish, whether it be for all the installation options or for even doing the breakdown of the partitions. And so you can automate all of that with RichARCH. It's all of the tools are there for you. I need to point this out, and I did it earlier, and I apologize, but the main download repo is at SourceForge, and I'll put these links in the description below, but you want to go to sourceforge.net/project/RichARCH. You can also go to the main RichARCH page, which is under Google. So sites.google.com/view/RichARCH. You can also Google RichARCH and it'll come up, but it'll have all the links that you need. if you're doing this natively on a PC build, on a native system, you may want to look at some other tools like Ventoy, where you can just throw the ISO on a USB stick with Ventoy, and it makes it really easy for you to install from there. And I'll do a separate video on that as well. But today we're just doing a VM. And I'm gonna go prep some notes here. I'll be right back for this video. Hey, another quick side note. If you do have a graphics card, you do have a dedicated discrete GPU, I highly recommend that you flip on 3D acceleration inside of VMware Workstation Pro. The other nice thing about VMware's solution or hypervisor is it's going to have great, fantastic support for 3D acceleration. It's just going to be more streamlined. It's just going to work out of the box. I've never had an issue with it personally. I'm not going to say that there aren't, but it's just a much more streamlined experience. Plus, you're going to have a nice, smooth desktop environment with that on once we get that installed, or once you add that to your installation through RichARCH. So I wanted to jump back and show you that real quick. So under the VM settings, go to Display. And then under that, in Settings, you're going to check the box for Accelerate 3D, and then maximize your video memory as much as you can. I'm going to give it like maybe 2 to 4, and that will help out tremendously when we go to run a desktop environment. So I'm going to hit OK on that, and then we'll get back to where we were. Be right back. All right, we're back at the shell, and once you've booted into it, into the ISO, the native installation shell, I like to call it that, ignore all this installation guide stuff. That's if you were getting started without RichARCH. So today we're using RichARCH. Let's see, I want to zoom in for you here. I'm just going to go into full screen mode here, and turn on free stretch, and that way it'll be a little more clear for you. So the first thing we want to do from the install shell here is to call the main RichARCH installation scripting, and RichARCH gives you a nice clean way to do that. There's instructions on the site and in the SourceForge page. But basically, you're going to launch a bash command, but we're going to redirect into bash this curl command. We're going to do curl-l download sourceforge.net/RichARCH/install. Okay, and what that's going to do, it's going to reach out to SourceForge in the RichARCH repo and call the installation script that's set up in the repo there. And we're going to fire that off. And this is going to walk you through the installation. So yes, we want to install. And this is where we need to specify our keyboard type, or language type. If I kill the full screen for a second, you can see basically it's saying select key mapping. Let me go back to the full screen mode here. Actually, let's just get back out of that so that you can see that better. And so I'm ready to select US, and then let's go down to US. You can also page down the list. And then locale, my locale's English, so we're going to do EN. And then my time zone, I'm Eastern Standard, so I'm going to just choose New York. Did I pass it? Oh, there it is. And then for portable devices, you can use TLP? No, we're not doing that today. Yes, I'm on an AMD host, so I'm gonna hit OK. No, I don't want to do GPU drivers. I'm on a hypervisor, so that's gonna manage all that for me. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it as you. And then this is kind of cool. If you're into hardened kernels, or maybe some extra kernels that you want to test, there's a specific like CatchyOS kernel from the Chaotic AUR, a bunch of options there. I'm just using the default Arch kernel. Give your system a name for the OS. I'm going to do RichARCH to keep it simple. Domain name, I'm not doing any fanciness with the domain, so I'm just going to do local domain. And I'm going to input a password for the root. Please don't do this. This is for demo purposes. And then we're going to call my main system user sysuser to keep it simple. I'm going to do the same password. Don't do this. Okay, so now we can go ahead and choose a desktop environment. I am not going to do that for a couple reasons. I want to reveal that and show you how flexible RichARCH is to work with. So we're going to hit none here. So I'm just going to do a minimal install for the moment. And I'm going to hit OK. And we want to do our mirror locations. I'm in the US, so I'm going to choose US. And yes, this is my VM storage device. Pay close attention to that device abbreviation. VMware does SDA for its virtual disks. So you'll have SDA, and then once we install the operating system, we'll have an SDA1 where we want the OS partition to go. So this is the main partition that will, create your file system, etc. So we want SDA, yes. And I'm going to do LVM. A lot of people just avoid LVM. I don't get it. LVM makes it so easy to come back and make changes to your hard disk spread and partitions later. It really keeps it easy. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. Unless you know you have specific use cases and needs for things like Btrfs or other things, I highly, highly recommend LVM, okay? So we're gonna do that. And obviously, this is gonna bring you into, because I chose LVM, I don't want you to do anything automatically. I want to specify what I'm doing here. Don't be overwhelmed by this. I'm going to walk you through this. It's really simple, okay? So we're going to make a couple different partitions inside of this device. And it's really straightforward. Again, don't be overwhelmed by this. But basically what we have to do is make a Wi-Fi system which houses all of the partition table and main boot information, and then we create an LVM. And that's the beauty of LVM. You just need an LVM partition, and then it takes care of the rest. And you can segregate that LVM into swap space, your home, var as well, var log, var, your different setups within the LVM grouping. It's just so much easier. So we're going to hit this free space, okay? I'm going to hit new, get back over to this screen, and we want this first partition to be like small. So we're going to do 16 gig for this, and this is going to be just, I'm sorry, not 16, 1 gig for our Wi-Fi system. Don't need 16 gig for that. So we're going to do 1 gig. And then we want this to be, we're going to change the type, and we're going to make that our EFI system, okay? And then the rest of it, we're going to allocate towards, I'm going to do the 59 remaining because I'm doing a 60 gig virtual disk. I want this to be LVM. So we're going to go down here and specify Linux LVM. And then we're going to write that change to the virtual disk. Again, we're going to device SDA. That is the new disk that VMware squandered for us, or squared away. And then we're going to write that. Are you sure? Yes, I am sure, because it's got the right device. And we're going to let that write out. And then we're going to quit. Okay, so now that we have that established, select your LVM partition, which is now SDA2. And we're going to hit OK. And now we have to allocate the different pieces or the different groupings within the LVM. This is why LVM is cool, because it's so easy to change and expand and affect later. So within the LVM space, we want to squander or square away a section of space for the root partition, okay? Now, I kind of follow a typical pattern with this because a lot of times I am working with virtual disks and virtual machines. So again, this is going to be all based off of how big of a disk you're allocating, whether this is a real system or a VM, etc. But I want to specify what my root size is. So for my root size out of the 60, I'm going to give it half of it. So I'm going to give it 30 gig. Excuse me. My swap, I'm going to give 10 for that. So now I've taken 40 of my 60, okay? And then for the home, I like to do 95% free. So that's basically saying, give me 95% rest and cap it at 95% free, okay? And then we're going to leave that there. Again, this is all personal preference. You can also do the auto LVM setup, but I don't recommend it. I would prefer that you go in here and specify what your LVM groupings are for your partition scheme, and then that way you have flexibility down the road should you run into a problem and you can tweak it. So we're going to hit OK. And we know that SDA1 is our EFI, so that's good. I'm going to hit OK there. And I'm going to go ahead and do ext4. That's just, again, personal preference for the formatting type. Unless you're doing something specific, I highly just recommend sticking with that default. And then we're going to let that churn away. So now RichARCH is taking over and taking care of all of the bootstrapping that needs to happen for all of the core packages and things that you need to get up and running with this minimal OS state. And I'm going to pause the video and continue once this reaches the end of this part. All right, once it gets to the setting up the mirror state or stage, it's going to go through and start trying to hit some mirrors. Don't be alarmed by the warnings here. It's trying out different mirrors within the region to figure out, okay, what's the best from a speed standpoint for this installation process. That's all it is. So don't let that alarm you. Again, I'm going to pause the video here and I'll continue once this finishes. Okay, once you reach the end of that core package installation where it's churning through the various mirrors, etc., you're going to come to this message and it's going to say, okay, now you're ready to reboot. Don't reboot. what I want you to do is power off, okay? After you did the power off there. So go into edit the virtual machine settings again, and then go to your CD-ROM and flip off of the ISO. We don't want to boot into that ISO anymore. Just click the physical drive auto detect option, okay? And then we want to connect to power on, okay? And then the other thing you want to do is go down to options, advanced, flip this to UFI, because we did UFI in the system type, and that's important. So we'll click OK on all of that, and then we'll fire back up the VM. Yeah, we want to connect to the main SATA that we established. So yes, we want to connect to that. And then this is just a heads up that, hey, if you want to connect to your removable devices on your host, you can establish that. All right, so you should get back to the main prompt here. And then, again, this is just to show you that RichARCH is established, or in the full-blown core Arch Linux is established rather through RichARCH. Okay, so we're going to try our sysuser that we established. A core Arch Linux system now established through RichARCH. And we could be good to go from here, but we want a desktop environment. Now, the beauty of this being a virtual environment on a hypervisor is we now have a base system. What I like to do is sort of make some tweaks and then pause and save this in state. That way I've always got a base vanilla RichARCH system that I can clone and maybe do a different desktop environment. Try a couple out. And it allows you to quickly and more rapidly produce a farm of servers running different desktop environments if you wanted to do that. The option is just to continue from here and go ahead and install that. But I like to pause, create this base environment. Now, before I sort of set this VM to the side, what I like to do is get the VMware tools installed. And I just Googled this. This is the popular package recommended for Arch Linux systems. So we're going to go ahead and follow these steps. So first we want to grab the OpenVM tools and enable the daemon. So we're going to do those things, okay? So I'm going to set this off to my other screen to the side so that I can follow that. And we're going to head, and so we're going to do sudo macman. First, I'm just going to do a general SY upgrade. You know, give me all the updates for what I've got. And we're going to do that first to make sure we got everything up to snuff. Okay, we're good. We got all the latest and greatest things. So now we can install OpenVM tools. Why do you need this? Well, it streamlines VM for the hypervisor for VMware and creates the necessary tooling. It makes the graphic experience much better. If you're in a desktop environment that's 3D accelerated, it enables like clipboard sharing. It does a lot of nice little tweaks to the operating system that are pretty much needed and keep things XF86 video VMware. Let me pause and figure out what the right package is. Yeah, sorry, that's outdated. We don't need that particular piece. The next critical step here is to enable the VM tools daemon service that needs to run. So we're going to do systemtl enable VM tools. Okay. And now that we've enabled that, now we need to start it up. Let's make sure it comes to life. And it did without error. And we want to check its status. Make sure we don't have any problems. Oops. Got a typo there. It's my bad. Okay, so it's active. And enabled and active and lovely. So now we can power this off. Why am I powering this off? I'll show you. All right, I'm going to clone this now. I've got a nice clean base system. And okay, blah, blah, blah. We're going to clone this thing. We're going to do manage, clone, next, current state, and next. We want to create a full clone. That's just my preference. If the problem with linked is if something goes corrupt with that original VM, then you're screwed. So just, I would, by practice, normally do a clone. And then we're going to call this, I'm going to do the KDE top environment. So I'm going to RichARCH KDE, store it in the same spot, and then hit finish. So now that we've done that, I can fire up this newly cloned VM. Yes, we want to connect to the virtual device, so power up, and okay. All right, we want to go into RichARCH. Now, granted, if you don't have the disk space for this, doing multiple VMs like this, then you can just stick with modifying the original. Okay, so now that I've cloned, I can pick up with the step where RichARCH helps you bootstrap and install a desktop environment, and I want to do KDE. So the way you do that is it's very similar to what we script, because we're picking up in the middle here. So curl L download source forge RichARCH and then UI, okay, instead of install. Now it's going to walk me through. I'm going to put in my sudo password because I'm not root, and now it's going to ask me to verify, yes, you want to install a desktop environment? Yes, I do. And no, we don't want any specific servers because that's going to mess up our VM. And I want to do KDE. Now, this part is extra cool. Now that we're saying KDE, are there specific pieces of software that you want to go ahead and install as well? RichARCH has done a fantastic job of curating a list of popular pieces of software that people like to use, whether it's graphics or development or communications. Like I know specifically that, let's see here, I want to have a graphic editor and I like Krita, so I'm going to put Krita on there. I want to, maybe mess with some video editing. Why you'd want to do that inside of a VM, I don't know, but hey, let's go ahead and do that. I want the YouTube downloader. I like that tool. I might want to listen sick. He's got a whole ton of cool stuff. I like audio editing because I mess around with some audio software a lot. And you could do some office tooling like LibreOffice. Let's go ahead and do that. I like some helpers for the AUR. This is PAMAC is awesome for having a graphical package manager for the chaotic repo. And then if you want just a general robust CLI for the command line. I like to do patroo as well. Up on the chaotic R, AUR, if you're not familiar with it, the level is it's pre-compiled packages that are popular. And instead of having to download, compile, install, you're just having to download and install. And they go ahead and pre-compile for you, which saves you some time and potential headaches as well. I like the work terminal, and I know I'm going to start messing with ZSH eventually, so I'm going to put Z shell on there. All right, we're going to stop there and hit OK. And this is going to do it all for me. Okay, so once we have finished, then you're ready to reboot and test it out. So we're just going to type reboot here. And we should come out with KDE. And here it is. I put my password in. And now we have a full graphical environment. Look at that. Yay, KDE. So I can check and see if my software is there that I selected. So I did, we do LibreOffice is there. We did Krita, we did Kdenlive, or Kdenlive, as some people like to say. So it's all there and ready to go. What a great way to bootstrap Arch Linux, right? So now you see the power of RichARCH, especially if you're running a lab or a farm of servers. That's just KDE. So I could build another one that had Cosmic, another one for G, another one for, you name it, all of the desktops that RichARCH supports. He even has support for the newer stuff, the Sway-based interfaces, like Cool's Dots, the other interesting ones that are out there and becoming more popular. So check them all out. And this gives you a nice, easy way to do that, right? To spin up multiple VMs with different desktop environments and have Arch Linux ready to go. Another thing I want to talk about, and I'll probably detail this in a separate video, but RichARCH gives you the ability to set up an options file to kickstart all of those questions and auto answer those questions you saw in the beginning. So if you have a common installation scheme that you like to use, you can go ahead and steal one of his default options files and use those. So, I think it's examples. Yeah. So he has flag options files. And these are the options files for bootstrapping even faster. In fact, got some great templates in here for like SecOps, or that you're going to be doing Home or Hypervibe or Omarchy. He's got some pre-built flag options for that. I typically use it's all up here, but it just gives you a great way to even expedite installation and faster. And so I like to do, all those options that I just showed you. I've got my own flag options file that I repurpose. And so you'll see here it's got, my key mapping set up, the name of my system, the domain, the CPU type, all those questions we had to answer at the beginning can be automated. Awesome, awesome stuff, especially if you're spinning up a farm of virtual servers or you just want to quickly expedite installation. So that's a core overview of the power of RichARCH. I highly, highly recommend it, not just because I'm a part of the team, but because it's a great tool set for getting RichARCH getting Arch Linux installation expedited for you in a more streamlined fashion and getting that core packaging set up and ready to go. Thanks for joining me today. I'll leave some links in the comments to all this. And again, if you have questions, comments, maybe you've used RichARCH in the past, please share your experiences. And I hope to do some more videos on doing a USB stick install, bring some other things out, and all through the beauty of RichARCH. Thanks for joining me today. Have a good one.